got my intro music playing to get me motivated. I feel a beat, and it's making me want to do my math, my quadratic formula, even better. Yeah, just let it. The calm before the storm. I'm about to knock this math out. Something's in the air. Oh yeah. Let's go. Let's do it. Do you feel the I'm not sure what just happened there. I think something caused me to go under some kind of spell. But let's continue with today's lesson, shall we? We are working on the quadratic formula today. And the quadratic formula is this big booger that you see right here. And so you should know that formula. It'd be nice for my math analysis class to have this formula memorized. You notice you got B's, A's, and C's in there and all this good stuff. You got a square root radical there, negative B, plus or minus. That should be familiar to you. Notice that A, B, and C come from the trinomial. It has to equal 0. You can always use this when a quadratic equation doesn't factor. This is another way, by the way, just in case we're not clear. This is another way to solve a quadratic formula. In fact, this one right here works every time. You don't have to worry about it not working, but you want to make sure you set everything equal to 0 before you start substituting into this formula. All you do really is substitute and simplify. Most of the issue that people have with quadratic is simplifying the radical. And so we'll talk about that as we go through. Most of this video will be working on that. B squared minus 4ac. Underneath here is called the discriminant. If it's a perfect square, then the problem that you're working on will factor. Meaning if you get a positive 36 when you get through under here, or a positive 49 or 100, something that's a perfect square, then what you have under the actual trinomial, if I could talk, the trinomial will actually factor. Another thing is, if b squared minus 4ac is positive, then you should get two answers that are not like imaginary. If it equals 0, meaning this right here equals 0, then you got one solution that's real, no imaginary. And if b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, then you should have two imaginary solutions. Now, less than 0 is another way of saying negative. But I've done too much talking. Let's actually do some work, shall we? Let us look at a couple of examples. Oops, look at this, not that. Okay, I'm going to do the quadratic formula. The first thing I notice is that I need to subtract 5 from both sides. So I have 2x squared plus x minus 5 equals 0. I tell people at the beginning, guys, when you just really start to mess around with this, to go ahead and list A, B, and C. A equals 2, B equals 1, not x, and C equals negative 5. And so I'm going to substitute those three things into the quadratic formula that you have written down. So that should say x equals negative b, sometimes it's in parentheses when it's negative, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. All of that is over 2 times a. So what I did was I substituted b, a, and c, and a in where they go. So remember, it just says substitute and simplify. So that's substitution. Now let's simplify. Another thing I like to do is go ahead and simplify on top of this. So that's 1 plus 40. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 5 is positive 40. So what you have here is negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 41 over 4. Okay? So that's what x equals. Now, you want to be familiar with how to write that as two separate answers. So, or several different ways. This is -1 over 4 plus, all right, like this, plus or minus the square root of 41 over 4. That's another way. But that's the same thing as -1/4 plus that and minus that. So how do I want you to write it? This is fine right here, this one. But all of these are the same thing. And then you can put them all as one fraction. So if a problem changes, you ought to know, or the answer changes. Like if I give you a paper that y'all need to grade, you ought to be able to look at that and see that your answer is the same. Let me keep working through these. So what I'm going to do is, there's a couple things you can do, but I'm going to keep it just like this. See that 2 change signs? And notice I could multiply everything by -1, but I'm not. A equals -1, B equals 2, and C equals -2. I don't have to change the signs here. Substituting x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. And so that's 4. Make sure you put that in parentheses. Negative, that's +4 minus 8 right here. -4 times -1. That's +4 times -2 is -8. And so this becomes x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 8 is, that's right, -4 all over -2. Now I want to simplify this. That's -2 plus or minus 2i over 2. You don't want to stop right here. Why not? Because you can simplify some more. One denominator goes into every term in the numerator. So that would be -1 plus or minus I. And there's 2 answers. That'll be -1 plus I, -1 minus I. So you simplify as much as you possibly can. Up here, this wasn't simplifying. This was just changing the form. Down here, that's simplifying. All right, another example. All right, in order for us to do this, remember I said it needs to equal 0. So my first thing is to subtract 5x, add 9 to both sides. When you do that, you get equal 0 over here. Those cancel out. That's x squared minus 6x plus 9. All right, x squared minus 6x plus 9. A is 1, B is -6, C is 9. Substituting. See, it's just simple substitution. X equals negative of -6. I usually like to put those in parentheses. See, that negative is already in the formula. So if you ever have a -b, you need to make sure you change that sign. Plus or minus, or insert both of them, I should say. B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. That's x equals +6, right? And this becomes 36. If you don't put the parentheses in there, you're going to get a -36. So you need to make sure you substitute right when you put parentheses in there. And this would be minus 36. -4 times 9 times 1 is minus 36. So that's plus or minus the square root of 0. Some of y'all had an issue with that. The square root of 0 should not be that big of a deal. I guess I hadn't talked about it before some of maybe the quiz or something like that. But if you would actually just put square root of 0 in your calculator, it tells you what it is. The square root of 0 is just 0. So really all I have here is 6 over 2, which equals 3. So x equals 3. Remember, the discriminant said if your b squared minus 4ac equals 0, then you only get one real answer. That's proof. So again, the issue with this is going to be simplifying the radical. And if you need me to work some more of these in class, just let me know. I'll do my best to give you some assistance. Peace.